If you want to deal with a curse fast, go to the menu called first. Yeah, go name my big man. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
If you clean your own ears, you need to know this. Cotton swabs are...
Shaking. This is all of your stabilizing muscles.
I'm gonna have to meet the shoulder. So I have to go on the next.
That don't always fire when you do traditional.
Adolf Hitler, one of the worst human beings to ever walk the earth. The very existence of a man like Hitler raises a lot on her with girls as young as 19 when he was 43. It also been incest, and things would only get stranger to this show of beating the family dog until it wet itself on the carpet. Adolf was a confident and free-spirited young man, so he received the worst of his father's physical abuse in their frequent fights. They also moved around a lot during Hitler's years, as Alois Sr. retired from his job as a customs official and decided to move to the Austrian town of Hafeld to farm bees. The move made things even worse for Adolf and Alois Sr.'s relationship. Adolf was enrolled in a strict state-funded elementary school and found himself at odds with the establishment's rules and regulations. This led to further violence from Alois, who wanted his son to take a similar career path to himself. While Clara tried to defend her son from his father's wrath, she often ended up on the receiving end instead. It was a truly toxic home life. When the bee business failed, the Hitlers continued to move around over the next few years. Hitler, now 8 years old, started to take an interest in art and performance. He began painting watercolors and even taking singing lessons from his school choir. However, his life would take a major hit when his brother Edmund died in 1900. This tragedy shook young Adolf, changing him from a confident, outgoing child to a withdrawn oddball who regularly got into fights with teachers and, of course, his father. By this point, the seeds of hatred and nationalism were already growing within young Adolf. A frightening but important thing to remember is that Hitler's views, while obviously scary and extreme to us in the modern day, had its roots in extremely common sentiments for pre-World War I Austria and Germany. Hitler and his friends, despite being Austrian, were loyal to the German
There's a lot of
cause,
hacks.
growing ethnic diversity in Austria, and would even greet each other with Heil. It's likely that many of the adults in his life expressed similarly hateful views, including his father and school teachers, making it seem extremely normal to believe such things to a growing Hitler. His school performance only got worse as the years went on. Alois wanted Adolf to work at the customs office and even took him on a tour in one of his early teen years. Hitler felt that this was the moment that the differences between him and his father became truly irreconcilable. He knew by now that he wanted to attend a classical school and develop his painting skills and become a professional artist, but his father instead forced him to attend a technical school. Hitler would later recount
Sammy, is this your first time playing all day?
badly in this school
Yeah,
on purpose,
I just
hoping
got
that when his
on.
father saw how terrible his performance was, he'd allow him to pursue his dream. This was the first of many grave miscalculations in Hitler's life. But in the end, one event did allow Hitler to drop out of school: the sudden and unexpected death of Alois Sr. in 1903. Likely due to a pleural effusion, he was out drinking at a local inn when he suddenly collapsed and died shortly after. When the 14-year-old Hitler saw his father's corpse, he supposedly began to weep uncontrollably. He and his father may have constantly been at each other's throats, but losing another family member was just too much. His school performance deteriorated further until his mother eventually
Yoink.
pulled him out of school entirely. After a year to put himself back together under the doting care of his mother, Hitler returned to school with improved grades and performance. He was never a particularly good student, but he was able to pass his exit exams with 2 different attempts. He left school with no intentions to continue pursuing a technical career.
Easy
With his
kill.
controlling father dead and his mother
My
being
thing
far more
wouldn't let me put
supportive
up my
of her
pants
son
on right
following
now.
his dreams, he set off to cosmopolitan Vienna to develop his
That might
artistic skills and hopefully join the Academy of Fine Arts.
Dang it.
By now, we all know how
Why
that
did that
turned
guy
out for
not
the
take
aspiring
any
artist.
damage?
Hitler was rejected twice by the Academy, finding his artistic abilities subpar. Because Hitler specialized in drawing landscapes and buildings, they suggested instead that he try his luck at the local Academy of Architecture. However, this is where Hitler's earlier decisions came back to bite him, because his poor
no, you had a
performance
way
left
better-
him without the necessary academic qualifications to enter the architecture college. Naturally, this left Hitler feeling pretty sour about his time in
Sammy, they
Germany.
got a new
Contrary
option
to popular
for the
belief,
this
belief,
game,
his
if you
rejection
press
in art
shift,
school wasn't
they
nearly
made
as
it where you can
important
change
in
your
his
mood color
development
in there.
as the ideas and beliefs he was beginning to learn from his new locale. Hitler had always been a nationalist, but in Vienna, it's believed that he first started developing his hardcore anti-Semitism. He read local magazines that blamed Jewish people for all the problems that Austria and Germany were experiencing. Some who knew Hitler claimed his anti-Semitism predated his time in Vienna, but it seemed as though this time in Vienna finally gave him the political and
Click
philosophical
F11,
framework
that'll
for
fix
his
it.
irrational hatred of the Jewish people. But amongst all this, one final tragedy would strike the now
Sammy,
18-year-old.
click F11.
Leave me
The
alone.
only
Click
surviving
F11.
member of his family that he was truly close with had been diagnosed with terminal breast cancer at the age of 47. She was diagnosed and treated by the Hitler family doctor, Dr. Edward Bloch. He later recounted that Clara took the news with
Dang
dignity
it.
as a deeply religious woman who believed that everything happened was part of God's plan. Adolf was devastated.
I don't
Dr.
really
Bloch
care
described
about-
the closeness of their relationship in later interviews, stating, "While Hitler was not a mother's boy in the usual sense, I never witnessed a closer attachment. Their love had been mutual. Clara Hitler adored her son.
I swear, I
She loved him
hate
his own
people
way
that do
whenever
that.
possible.
When you're
For
about to
example,
kill
she
someone,
admired his
they-
watercolor paintings and drawings and supported his artistic ambitions in opposition to his father, at what cost to herself, one may guess. When she finally died from the disease, Hitler was, according to Bloch, the saddest man he'd ever seen. He was utterly broken, his last tether to humanity and decency cut. It was clear that Dr. Bloch's good treatment of his mother meant a great deal to Hitler, as he was one
If
of the
you go
few
pick up,
Austrian Jews
it's
that
called,
were allowed to move from
Wheat
Austria
I don't
to the United
care.
States in 1940, as his genocidal plans were beginning to pick up steam. Later, being interviewed, Dr. Bloch described Clara as a kind and decent woman, and said that she would roll in her grave if she ever knew what a monster her beloved son became in the end. So, we return to the big question. Did Hitler's childhood turn him into a monster? Did Clara and Alois raise him to be a person capable of committing genocide? Was his childhood so tragic that it made him evil? Well, no. Hitler's beliefs were the product of popular and toxic philosophies that were rife during his time. Nationalism, authoritarianism, anti-Semitism. It might be more comforting to believe that Hitler was some kind of fluke, a supervillain born out of incest and abused into being evil by a controlling father. But even if Hitler had never joined the Nazi Party, a man like him would have.
Sammy,
Given
which
how
one do you
common it
like
was to
more,
think like he did back then,
Lunar
Hitler
or
never
Atla?
could have done what he did alone. It took
What?
millions agreeing with him, and millions
Do you
more
like,
simply doing nothing or being
Atla?
killed while trying
Atla
to rebel.
Lunar?
Bad childhoods don't
Red
cause
line.
genocides. A society growing to hate its most vulnerable people does. Now, go check out What If Hitler Never Existed? Or How Rich Was Hitler? Where did all his money come from? For more facts about history's worst monster.
There have been plenty of serial killer couples, but you could argue that the Brits had the worst of them. Couples like the literature-loving, psychopathic sadists Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, who murdered children in England in the 1960s. While those two murderers were sick to the nth degree, sometimes taking photos of themselves with their dead victims, and once recording a female victim pleading for her life, Fred and Rose West could be said to be even more vile. These were not natural-born killer types, wayward youngsters
I have to go
lost in
see
the
it.
madness of a killing spree.
Okay.
This terribly odd couple tortured, mentally abused, and murdered many young female victims in what certainly deserves to be called a house of horrors. Welcome to this episode of the Infographic Show.